Beneath the burning sun of the Nile Valley, where gold shimmered in the sand and the gods were said to walk among mortals, the ancient Egyptians crafted more than mere ornaments. They created symbols of power, faith, and eternal protection. Jewelry, for them, was not just a decoration. It was a sacred language, one that spoke to the divine and declared the soul's place in the cosmic order. Imagine a civilization where every ring, every pendant, and every gemstone carried a hidden meaning, where a simple amulet could promise safety in this world and the next. From the mighty Pharaoh to the humblest farmer, jewelry bound the living to the gods, and even the dead carried its brilliance into eternity. As the golden light of dawn struck the temples of Karnak and Thebes, the same glow flashed on the wrists and necks of those who believed their treasures could guard them from harm, grant them favor with the gods, and ensure their rebirth in the afterlife. The story of Egyptian jewelry begins not with vanity, but with belief. Long before diamonds became a symbol of love or gold a marker of wealth, the people of the Nile saw these materials as the skin of the gods themselves. Gold was the flesh of Ra, the sun god, imperishable, radiant, eternal. Lapis lazuli was the color of the heavens, linking the wearer to the infinite sky. Turquoise came from the Sinai mines and carried the blessings of Hathor, goddess of love and joy. Each piece of jewelry was a spell made visible, a whisper of devotion forged into metal and stone. To the Egyptians, wearing jewelry wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about aligning one's soul with divine forces. A necklace could protect you from evil spirits, a ring could bring fertility or courage, a scarab amulet could help your heart pass the judgment of Osiris. But beyond faith, jewelry was also identity, an unmistakable badge of who you were in the eyes of society. The pharaoh's diadem glittered with sacred cobras, symbols of divine authority ready to strike at chaos. Nobles wore broad collars of gold and faience, heavy enough to remind them of the power they carried, delicate enough to display the craftsmanship of Egypt's finest artisans. Even the poorest wore simple beads or clay amulets, believing that the gods would not discriminate as long as faith was pure. It was a world where status and spirituality met in shimmering harmony, and every person, no matter how high or low, sought to be adorned in a way that connected them to eternity. What makes Egyptian jewelry even more fascinating is how timeless it feels. Thousands of years have passed, and yet the designs, the ankh, the scarab, the Eye of Horus, still captivate us today. These were not trends that faded. They were ideas carved into the fabric of human imagination. Think of a queen stepping from her palace balcony, sunlight catching the inlaid stones of her collar, each gem reflecting centuries of meaning. Think of a craftsman hunched over his work, pressing gold leaf onto a tiny amulet while murmuring a prayer. Think of a child buried with a small charm around their neck, a token meant to light their path to the afterlife. Every piece told a story of love, loss, hope, and the eternal search for protection from the unseen. But what truly draws us in is not just the beauty of these ornaments, it's the mystery behind them. How did a civilization over 4,000 years ago manage such sophistication in design, metallurgy, and symbolism? How did they achieve purity of gold that rivals modern technology? And why, even today, do we feel a strange connection when we see an Egyptian pendant or a golden scarab? Perhaps it's because jewelry, more than any other artifact, bridges the gap between the living and the dead. It carries fingerprints, warmth, intention, a trace of the person who wore it and the world they believed in. The ancient Egyptians knew that while the body may turn to dust, the gold remains, gleaming like a memory that refuses to fade. In the silence of tombs, archaeologists have found treasures untouched for millennia. Rings that once sealed royal decrees, necklaces placed over the chests of queens, earrings that jingled in palace halls long gone. Each discovery is a reminder that Egyptian jewelry was never just art. It was immortality made tangible. And as we uncover these forgotten treasures today, we are not just studying ancient fashion. We are listening to a message sent across time, from a civilization that believed beauty could protect the soul and that gold, like the sun, would shine forever. Deep within the bustling workshops of ancient Memphis and Thebes, the air shimmered with the heat of furnaces and the rhythmic chime of hammers against gold. Here, beneath the watchful eyes of the gods, Egypt's master craftsmen shaped eternity with their hands. Every stroke of a chisel, every thread of wire, every polished stone carried not only artistry but intention. Jewelry in ancient Egypt was never mass-produced. It was handcrafted magic a blend of skill, devotion, and divine purpose. The materials themselves were chosen with care, not merely for beauty, but for their spiritual essence. Gold, for instance, was more than metal. It was believed to be the very flesh of the gods, a symbol of incorruptibility. It never tarnished, just as the sun never ceased to rise. To hold gold was to hold a piece of eternity, to capture the essence of Ra's undying light. Lapis lazuli, a deep celestial blue imported from distant Afghanistan, was prized more than silver and nearly as sacred as gold. Its deep hue mirrored the heavens where the gods resided, linking mortals to divinity. Turquoise came from the Sinai Peninsula, where miners worked under the protection of Hathor, the goddess of joy and beauty. Carnelian, with its blood-red glow, was a stone of life and vitality, thought to grant strength to warriors and passion to lovers. Even common stones like feldspar or faience were not overlooked. They carried symbolic color meanings that spoke to Egyptian spirituality. The combination of these materials transformed each piece of jewelry into a personal shrine, a microcosm of the divine order the Egyptians called *mat*, the balance of all things. In the dim light of these workshops, artisans who were often considered priests of their craft whispered invocations as they worked. They were not merely goldsmiths, they were alchemists, translating divine will into tangible form. Some inscriptions even suggest that a piece of jewelry wasn't considered complete until it had been breathed upon by a priest, a ritual act to awaken its protective power. When they engraved the Eye of Horus or shaped the ankh, it wasn't decoration, it was invocation. Each symbol was a living charm, designed to protect, bless, or empower the wearer. This spiritual engineering was what made Egyptian jewelry so unique. Every line and color served a purpose. The artisans used remarkable techniques that still impress modern jewelers. They mastered lost, wax casting, filigree, granulation, and intricate inlay work. They could hammer gold to paper, thin sheets, or twist it into delicate wire without it breaking. They knew how to create faience, a brilliant blue, green glaze made from ground quartz and copper, symbolizing fertility and rebirth. This technological mastery allowed them to create collars with hundreds of tiny beads, golden diadems that sparkled like sunlight, and scarabs so finely carved they could fit into a fingertip. Each creation was a statement of both human genius and divine inspiration. And behind every royal jewel there was a story. When archaeologists opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, they found not only the boy, king's golden mask, but a treasure trove of jewelry, bracelets, pendants, pectorals, rings, each one pulsing with symbolic meaning. His broad collar was adorned with falcons representing Horus, wings spread to protect the pharaoh's spirit. His rings bore images of ankhs, kartaches, and sacred cobras, ensuring divine protection in life and the afterlife. Even his sandals were inlaid with scenes of enemies crushed beneath his feet, a declaration of dominance he would carry into eternity. These treasures weren't just status symbols. They were talismans meant to preserve his soul's strength as he journeyed through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. But jewelry wasn't reserved only for kings. Queens and priestesses wore elaborate headdresses and necklaces heavy with meaning. Queen Ahotep's golden flies, awarded for bravery in battle, symbolized persistence and victory. The goddess Hathor was often depicted wearing a men-at necklace, believed to bring fertility and divine protection. Even common people, though their jewelry was simpler, carried amulets made from clay, shell, or stone, proof that faith was not limited by wealth. Whether made of gold or humble faience, each ornament was a contract between mortal and divine, a wearable prayer to unseen forces. To wear jewelry in ancient Egypt was to speak the language of eternity. Each piece communicated something about who you were and what you believed in. It told others of your rank, your devotion, your hopes, and your fears. The wealthy might flaunt collars heavy with turquoise and gold, but even the poor wore beads in sacred colors, trusting they too could attract divine favor. It was, in every sense, the perfect fusion of art and faith. And, as the centuries passed, this visual language never faded. It evolved, adapted, and spread across continents, influencing jewelry design from Greece to Rome and beyond. In the flicker of torchlight, as molten gold cooled and artisans polished the final edge of a pendant, they were doing more than creating beauty. They were freezing a moment of divine light, capturing a fragment of belief in a form that would outlast dynasties. Their work was not for fashion but for forever. Across the golden sands of Egypt, every shimmer of jewelry was more than adornment. It was a silent prayer to the gods. In the heart of ancient belief, jewelry acted as a sacred bridge between the mortal and the divine, a tool through which humans could touch eternity. The Egyptians did not see their ornaments as lifeless metal. They believed these treasures pulsed with divine power. To them, a necklace could protect a soul, a ring could seal a bond with the gods, and an amulet could turn away the shadow of death itself. Each symbol worn upon the body served a purpose, spiritual, magical, and eternal. The most powerful and recognizable of these symbols was the **Eye of Horus **, known as *Wedjat**, born from the myth of Horus and Set. The eternal battle between good and evil. It symbolized healing, protection, and restoration. The story told that Horus lost his eye in combat, and when it was miraculously restored, it became a symbol of renewal and wholeness. Egyptians wore it carved in gold, inlaid with lapis and turquoise, or painted on tomb walls to ensure the body remained unharmed in the afterlife. Sailors drew it on the prows of ships, and mothers hung it around their children's necks, believing it could ward off illness and misfortune. The Eye of Horus was not simply jewelry. It was a guardian, an eternal watcher between worlds. Another sacred symbol, the **Ankh**, known as the Key of Life, was perhaps the most enduring emblem of Egypt. Its looped shape represented the union of heaven and earth, male and female, mortality and immortality. Gods were often depicted holding the Ankh to a pharaoh's lips, offering the breath of life. It appeared on amulets, rings, and necklaces, and to wear it was to carry the promise of rebirth. For Egyptians, death was not an end, it was a continuation. The Ankh embodied that cycle, serving as a constant reminder that life and death were only two sides of the same sacred coin. Then there was the **Scarab beetle **, one of the most beloved and mysterious symbols of ancient Egypt. This small creature, rolling its ball of dung across the sand, became a symbol of creation and resurrection. Egyptians believed it mirrored the sun god Ra, who rolled the fiery sun across the sky each day. Scarab amulets were carved from green jasper or lapis, often inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead. They were placed over the heart of the deceased to ensure safe passage to the afterlife and protection from evil. Soldiers wore them into battle, lovers exchanged them as tokens of fidelity. The scarab was a symbol of transformation, the constant renewal of life beneath the gaze of the gods, but these were only the most famous. Every symbol carried meaning, each one tuned to a different aspect of the divine order. The ** lotus flower **, for instance, represented rebirth and creation. It closed at night and opened at dawn, mirroring the journey of the sun and the soul's awakening in the afterlife. The ** jed pillar **, associated with Osiris, symbolized stability and strength. It was often carved into amulets placed along the spine of mummies, ensuring the deceased would stand upright in the next world. Even the ** shen ring **, a simple loop of rope, carried deep significance. It represented infinity and divine protection, a circle without beginning or end, to where it was to exist within the eternal embrace of the gods. Every temple, every tomb, and every piece of jewelry told the same story. Life was fragile, but the divine was forever. Egyptians wore these symbols as daily armor against unseen forces. They believed the world was full of both light and darkness, gods and spirits, blessings and curses. Jewelry was their shield, their silent weapon in this spiritual battlefield. To wear the right amulet was to walk under the sun's protection. To be buried with them was to ensure a safe awakening in the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. Priests blessed jewelry through rituals that filled them with divine energy. Goldsmiths worked not only with their hands, but with their faith, reciting incantations as they engraved sacred hieroglyphs. Some pieces were designed specifically for funerary rites, others for love, fertility, or divine favor. A necklace of blue faience beads might be a symbol of youth and renewal, while a golden bracelet bearing the names of gods acted as a personal invocation. Jewelry was languid. Each combination of stone, metal, and symbol formed a prayer too sacred for words. And when the pharaohs wore these ornaments, they were not merely adorning themselves with wealth. They were declaring divine authority. The glittering crowns, the pectorals encrusted with turquoise and carnelian, the golden cuffs and collars, all reflected their godlike status. They did not rule by human law alone, but by the will of the divine, and their jewelry made that truth visible. Each gem glinting in the sun was a reminder that the pharaoh was the living Horus on earth, the link between the mortal and the eternal. In this world of shimmering symbolism, jewelry was both protection and proclamation. It bound the human spirit to the cosmic order and transformed metal into meaning. The Egyptians understood something timeless, that what we wear is an extension of who we are and what we believe. Through their jewelry, they spoke to gods, to death, and to eternity itself. And even now, across thousands of years, their silent prayers still shine through the dust. In ancient Egypt, jewelry was not just a reflection of beauty, it was a reflection of power. Every glittering necklace, every gold-plated crown, every gemstone, encrusted bracelet told a story about who you were, how much influence you wielded, and how close you stood to the gods. The streets of Thebes and Memphis might have been filled with traders, farmers, and priests, but even from afar, you could tell who belonged to which world simply by the light that shimmered from their adornments. For the pharaohs and the elite, jewelry wasn't just wealth. It was the language of authority, a golden proclamation that separated the divine from the ordinary. When the sun struck the golden collar of a noble, it was meant to dazzle. That was no accident. It symbolized the radiance of Ra, the sun god, shining through the wearer. The higher one's status, the more intricate the design, the rarer the gemstones, and the deeper the spiritual symbolism. Pharaohs, queens, and high priests wore heavy collars made of gold and turquoise, broad as shields, with hundreds of inlaid stones forming sacred shapes. falcons, cobras, scarabs, and lotus petals. These were not only beautiful but coded with meaning: protection, resurrection, stability, and divine favor. To wear them was to declare oneself chosen by the gods. In contrast, the common people wore simpler jewelry, beads of faience, shell, or clay, colored to imitate the brilliance of precious stones. Though humble in material, they were rich in belief. Even the poorest farmer might wear a small amulet around his neck, carved into the shape of an eye or an ankh, trusting that it would guard him and his family from harm. Jewelry in Egypt was the great equalizer. It allowed everyone, from pharaoh to peasant, to carry a piece of divine power. What separated them was not belief, but access to gold and craftsmanship. Among Egypt's most powerful symbols of wealth and divinity stood its queens, women whose beauty and influence became immortal. Queen Nefertiti whose name means the beautiful one has come, understood the power of appearance like no other. Her famous bust, with its delicate features and elegant crown, tells only part of the story. Archaeologists have found evidence that she, too, was adorned in gold collars, gemstone, studded earrings, and elaborate diadems that framed her face in the light of the gods. Nefertiti's jewelry wasn't mere vanity, it was political theater. Every jewel she wore in public was a calculated expression of grace, dominance, and divine approval. Cleopatra Roman 7 the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, took this symbolism even further. She used jewelry as a weapon of influence. Draped in gold and gems imported from across her empire, she understood how to command attention and project power through appearance. The Greek historian Plutarch wrote that when she met Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, she appeared as if descended from the goddess Isis herself. Her gold bracelets glimmering like the rays of the sun, her jeweled necklaces shimmering with blue and green light. Cleopatra's adornments were not only for allure. They were statements of sovereignty, tools of diplomacy, and armor in the theater of power. For the men of power, jewelry carried equal importance. Pharaohs like Tutankhamun and Ramses Roman, too, were buried with mountains of ornaments, rings, earrings, collars, and scepters, each inscribed with sacred imagery. Their jewelry reflected their cosmic role as intermediaries between gods and mortals. Rings engraved with their cartouches symbolized eternal rule. Pectorals depicting Horus and Ra marked their divine protection. Serpentine headbands represented royal authority. Even in death, these symbols accompanied them, ensuring their spirits retained status in the afterlife. The priests, too, held a sacred relationship with jewelry. They wore amulets consecrated in temple rituals, believing the divine essence within would protect them as they performed sacred duties. The high priests of Ammon at Thebes often wore gold inlays shaped like rams or solar discs, while priestesses of Hathor adorned themselves with men-at necklaces and sistrum charms used in temple ceremonies. For them, jewelry was not fashion. It was faith materialized in metal. The artisans who crafted these masterpieces were, in their own way, the invisible elite. Though they rarely wore the treasures they created, they were deeply respected. Their hands gave form to divinity. In the workers' village of Deir el-Medina, excavations have uncovered small amulets, fragments of gold leaf, and tools that once shaped the regalia of kings. Even these artisans carried simple charms, symbols of protection for their delicate work and their souls. It was as if every layer of Egyptian society, from ruler to craftsman, from priest to peasant, was bound together by this golden thread of belief. What's remarkable is how consistent the symbolism remained. Whether a queen's crown or a villager's bead, the meaning was shared: protection, power, eternity. Jewelry was the mirror of Egyptian society, structured, hierarchical, yet united by a universal faith in the unseen. It was beauty with purpose, wealth with wisdom, ornament with soul. When we look at these treasures today, glittering under museum lights, it's easy to see them as relics of luxury, but to the Egyptians, they were alive. They pulsed with divine energy, whispering secrets of status, protection, and immortality. They weren't just accessories of the rich. They were the heartbeat of a civilization that believed gold could outlast time itself. In the heart of ancient Egypt, death was never the end. It was merely a passage, a journey to a world beyond the stars, and for that journey, the dead needed protection, guidance, and power. Jewelry became the language of eternity, a silent companion to the soul as it crossed into the afterlife. Inside tombs sealed for millennia, archaeologists have uncovered this sacred relationship between adornment and immortality. Amulets laid across chests, golden necklaces draped over linen wrappings, and rings inscribed with prayers meant to speak for the dead when their voices could no longer be heard. Every piece had a purpose. Every ornament was a safeguard against the unknown. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was not a mystery. It was an expectation. They believed the soul, or ***, would rise again, and to do so safely, the body had to be preserved and protected. Jewelry served as both charm and armor. As embalmers wrapped the mummified body, priests placed amulets at precise locations. The heart, the throat, the wrists, the feet, each corresponding to a different form of spiritual defense. These were not random decorations. They were spells in metal and stone. The Book of the Dead described many of them in detail, specifying which should be used and how they should be inscribed. A scarab over the heart symbolized rebirth and protection in judgment. An ankh near the chest ensured the breath of eternal life. A jed pillar along the spine granted strength and resurrection. Together, they formed a divine shield for the soul's perilous journey. Gold was the material of choice for eternity. The Egyptians believed that gold was the flesh of the gods, untarnishable, radiant, eternal. That is why so many funerary masks, including the legendary face of Tutankhamun, were made of solid gold. It wasn't about wealth, it was about transformation. Gold allowed the deceased to shine like Ra, to become one with the sun's undying light. The pharaohs didn't merely wish to be remembered, they sought to be reborn as gods, and their jewelry was the key to that metamorphosis. Inside tombs, archaeologists have found intricate necklaces with pendants shaped like vultures, cobras, and eyes, all protective forces in Egyptian mythology. The vulture represented the goddess Nekhbit, who guarded Upper Egypt and wrapped her wings around the dead to shield them from harm. The cobra, linked to the goddess Wajet, was a symbol of divine protection, often seen on royal crowns and amulets alike. The Eye of Horus appeared again and again, watching over the deceased as it once watched over the living. These symbols weren't chosen for beauty, they were chosen for power. Each amulet carried a vibration, a spell, a promise written in the language of eternity. Even the placement of jewelry in tombs followed ritual order. Necklaces were placed across the chest to strengthen the heart. Rings were slipped onto fingers to maintain control and authority in the next world. Anklets and bracelets were tied around limbs to ensure mobility in the afterlife, while earrings adorned mummies to help them hear. The divine words of Osiris, the lord of the underworld. The Egyptians believed that these adornments didn't just decorate the body, they reactivated it. They turned the still, wrapped figure into a living, divine being capable of awakening in another realm. Commoners, too, shared this faith, even if they couldn't afford gold or gemstones. They were buried with faience beads, small scarabs, or clay amulets shaped like ankhs or shen rings. These simple ornaments carried the same hope as the treasures of kings. The belief that faith, not fortune, was what truly granted eternal peace. Some tombs even contained handmade necklaces strung together by family members. tokens of love meant to follow their loved ones beyond the grave. In death, jewelry became a bridge between the living and the dead, a final gift, a final prayer. The most remarkable example of this faith can still be seen in Tutankhamun's burial treasures. His tomb held more than 140 pieces of jewelry, each meticulously placed. Around his neck hung a pectoral featuring a scarab made from desert glass, a material formed by meteoric impact, symbolizing creation born from cosmic fire. Another amulet depicted the falcon god Horus protecting the young pharaoh's heart. Rings carved with hieroglyphs called upon the gods to grant him safe passage. Even his sandals were decorated with golden figures of conquered enemies, ensuring he would walk in victory through eternity. Every artifact was a thread in a grand design, an eternal costume woven for a god in the making. For the Egyptians, to die adorned was to die protected. Jewelry was not vanity, it was destiny. It was the promise that death would not devour them, that their spirit would rise with the sun and live forever among the stars. The glitter of gold, the shimmer of lapis, the gleam of turquoise, all of it reflected their most sacred truth, that life and death were not opposites but continuations of the same divine journey. And so, when modern archaeologists unearth these treasures, they are not merely uncovering objects, they are awakening prayers. Every amulet, every necklace, every ring is a voice from the past whispering the same message across the centuries. I was here, I believed, and through these sacred symbols I endure. Amid the eternal monuments and divine temples of ancient Egypt, love found its own sacred expression, not through words alone, but through gold, stone, and the symbols of eternity. Jewelry was not only worn for protection or power, it was also an intimate language of affection, a way to say, I cherish you. In a world where emotions were rarely spoken aloud, the Egyptians understood love as both human and divine, a bond between hearts that mirrored the union of gods and goddesses. And like everything sacred, that love was adorned with meaning, sealed in precious metal, and worn close to the skin. The exchange of jewelry in ancient Egypt went far beyond luxury. It was a promise, a spiritual contract. Rings, in particular, carried profound symbolism. Long before the modern wedding ring, Egyptian couples exchanged circular bands as tokens of commitment. The circle represented eternity. No beginning, no end, just an endless cycle of devotion. Some were made of woven reeds or leather for the poor, while the wealthy crafted theirs from gold and silver. Archaeologists have uncovered examples of lovers' rings engraved with the names of couples side by side, a touching testament to the fact that even in the land of gods and pharaohs, the human heart sought connection. But love in Egypt wasn't always quiet. The walls of tombs and papyri reveal passionate poetry written between lovers, words that still feel alive thousands of years later. In one ancient poem, a woman says, "My heart longs to go down to the water to see my love. My heart trembles within me when I see him." Such emotions often found their physical echo in gifts of jewelry. A golden amulet shaped like a lotus might symbolize rebirth and new beginnings in a relationship. A pair of matching scarab pendants could represent transformation through love. When a man offered jewelry to a woman, he wasn't merely giving her wealth. He was giving her protection, status, and a piece of his soul. The gods themselves set the divine model for this affection. The union of Isis and Osiris, perhaps the most famous love story in Egyptian mythology, inspired generations of lovers. Isis's devotion to Osiris, even after his death, became a symbol of eternal fidelity. Many amulets depicting the goddess were worn by couples, representing enduring love and resurrection. The intertwining of divinity and emotion meant that every gift of jewelry carried spiritual resonance. When a husband presented a necklace or bracelet to his wife, it wasn't simply an adornment. It was a sacred blessing. invoking the gods' protection over their bond. Queen Nefertiti and Pharaoh Akhenaten are among the most famous couples in Egyptian history, whose affection was immortalized through art and adornment. In temple reliefs, they are depicted wearing nearly identical jewelry, broad collars of gold and lapis, rings and anklets that mirror one another, a visual declaration of unity. Their reign was unique in its emphasis on love and partnership. Nefertiti was often portrayed beside her husband, not behind him, suggesting a shared rule and spiritual equality. The jewelry they wore became an extension of this harmony, a glittering bridge between their hearts and their divine destiny. Even funerary jewelry reflected romantic devotion. Husbands and wives were sometimes buried with matching amulets or rings, ensuring they would find one another in the afterlife. Some tomb inscriptions carried heartfelt dedications, "May we walk together in the fields of eternity." Jewelry, in this way, became the thread connecting love across time and space, a promise that not even death could break. What makes Egyptian love jewelry so moving is how human it feels. Behind every golden bracelet and engraved ring lies a heartbeat, a story of tenderness preserved in metal and memory. The artisans who shaped these pieces understood that love itself was divine energy. They infused it into their creations with care and ritual precision. Whether it was a young woman wearing a turquoise pendant gifted by her betrothed, or a queen adorned with royal diadems symbolizing her union with a god, king, the sentiment was the same. Jewelry was the visible expression of invisible affection. And perhaps that is why so many of these ancient love tokens have survived. Gold does not rust, and neither does the human heart. The Egyptians, with their unshakable belief in eternity, captured love in its purest form, changing, undying, eternal. Every ring unearthed from a tomb, every necklace wrapped around a mummy's chest, is not just a relic of the past. It is a love letter written in metal, still gleaming beneath the dust of time. In the golden glow of an Egyptian sunset, when the Nile shimmered like liquid light, one can almost imagine lovers exchanging their gifts, whispering promises carried on the desert breeze. To them, love was not fleeting, it was sacred. And through their jewelry, they ensured it would live forever. In the cradle of ancient Egypt, where life and death were woven together in sacred rhythm, even the smallest and most fragile lives were wrapped in protection. Children, the promise of the future, were believed to be watched by both the living and the divine, and their safety depended not only on care and nurture, but on the invisible power of magic. Jewelry for Egyptian children was more than decoration, it was defense. Amulets, beads, and charms were the silent guardians of the young, shielding them from disease, evil spirits, and misfortune. To an Egyptian parent, adorning a child was an act of love and faith, a way to place divine hands around their tiny shoulders. From the moment a baby was born, protective amulets were tied around their necks, wrists, or ankles. These small ornaments were often made of faience, copper, or even clay, but they carried enormous symbolic weight. One of the most common was the tayet, or knot of Isis, a symbol of life and protection associated with the goddess herself. Mothers believed the tayet channeled Isis's maternal strength, guarding their children as she once guarded her son, Horus. Another common charm was the Bes amulet, representing the dwarf god Bes, a fierce but benevolent protector of households, women, and children. With his wide eyes, protruding tongue, and lion mane, Bes was both comical and terrifying, meant to scare away demons and evil spirits lurking in the shadows. The Taweret amulet, shaped like a pregnant hippopotamus, was another favorite. This goddess of childbirth and fertility was believed to watch over mothers and infants, ensuring safe delivery and peaceful sleep. Her image could be found not only on jewelry but on furniture, mirrors, and cradles, anywhere protection was needed. The presence of these charms in children's burials and domestic spaces shows how deeply Egyptians intertwined daily life with divine safeguarding. They didn't separate faith from existence. They lived within it, moment by moment, breath by breath. Children's jewelry was crafted with the same care as that of adults, though on a smaller scale. Tiny bracelets of blue and green faience beads, anklets strung with carnelian or feldspar, and necklaces with miniature amulets have been found in tombs and settlements alike. The choice of color was deliberate. Blue symbolized creation and rebirth, green stood for growth and life, red for protection against chaos. These colors weren't random aesthetics. They were spiritual codes woven into the fabric of survival. Even poor families made sure their children wore something symbolic, believing that divine favor did not depend on wealth but on faith. The most powerful talisman for children was often the Eye of Horus. As a symbol of health and restoration, it protected them from illness, injury, and the evil eye. Parents tied small versions of this charm around their babies' necks or stitched them into clothing. In ancient artwork, young children are sometimes depicted naked except for a protective amulet hanging over their chest, reminder that even innocence needed armor in a world full of unseen dangers. For older children, jewelry also marked transition and identity. As they grew, their adornments evolved, from simple bead strings to more elaborate designs reflecting family status and personal protection. Boys of noble families might wear gold bangles or signet rings engraved with their names, while girls could receive necklaces blessed by priestesses. These were not casual gifts. They were blessings passed from generation to generation, carrying ancestral energy and prayers. Archaeologists have uncovered small boxes in tombs that once held children's jewelry, heart-breaking yet tender glimpses of ancient parenthood. In one case, a young child's mummy was found with a delicate turquoise bracelet still resting around its wrist. Another tomb held a necklace of blue beads shaped like lotus flowers, a symbol of rebirth and the rising sun, perhaps placed there by grieving parents who hoped their child would awaken in the next life, blooming once more under the light of Ra. Jewelry for children wasn't only about protection, it was also about belonging. In a society that believed in divine order, every individual, no matter how young, had a place in the cosmic balance. Adornments helped define that connection. A child wearing a sacred amulet wasn't just protected. They were acknowledged by the gods, part of the eternal story that bound all Egyptians together. Even in playful moments, jewelry carried meaning. Some toys and rattles were made with bead charms, combining joy and protection in a single object. It's as if Egyptian parents wanted their children to laugh under the watchful eyes of their gods. This blending of innocence and sanctity is what makes their culture so profound. They saw divinity not as distant, but as something woven into every heartbeat, every breath, every glittering ornament tied around a child's wrist. Through these small, sacred tokens, Egyptian parents extended their love beyond what hands could hold. They couldn't shield their children from every danger, but they could surround them with faith. And thousands of years later, those tiny amulets, still shimmering under the desert dust, speak to us in a universal language, that even in the most ancient times, the purest form of protection was love made tangible. Across the shifting sands of centuries, Egyptian jewelry evolved like a living language, each dynasty adding its own accent, each era polishing new meanings into ancient symbols. From the earliest days of the Old Kingdom to the cosmopolitan splendor of the Ptolemaic age, jewelry was more than art. It was a timeline carved in gold, a reflection of Egypt's changing soul. Every bead, every carved gemstone, tells us not just about beauty, but about power, faith, and cultural transformation. In the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BC, jewelry was already a symbol of divine order. The earliest craftsmen worked with gold and copper, shaping simple yet elegant pieces, broad collars, cylindrical beads, and spiral bracelets. The designs were symmetrical, precise, and infused with mathematical harmony, echoing the pyramids themselves. These early adornments weren't flashy. They spoke of stability, balance, and the eternal nature of life under the watchful eyes of the gods. Men and women alike wore jewelry, but it was the nobility and royalty who adorned themselves most lavishly. In this era, to wear gold was to wear sunlight, the physical essence of Ra, the sun god. As Egypt entered the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BC, jewelry took on a more emotional and spiritual tone. The art of inlay became popular, with stones like carnelian, lapis lazuli, and turquoise set into intricate gold patterns. These colors weren't chosen for beauty alone. They carried symbolic messages. Blue evoked the heavens and the primeval waters of creation. Red represented vitality and protection. Green symbolized growth and rebirth. Craftsmen experimented with contrasts, blending metal and stone to create divine harmony. Jewelry became not only decoration for the living, but also vital equipment for the dead. Amulets and necklaces were buried with the deceased, ensuring safe passage through the afterlife. Even common citizens, if they could afford it, commissioned small charms to wear in life and carry into eternity. Then came the New Kingdom, Egypt's golden age of empire, art, and ambition. This was the era of pharaohs like Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun, the time when jewelry became a language of divine kingship. The designs grew more elaborate, more daring. Goldsmiths mastered the use of cloisonne, embedding tiny partitions of gold with vividly colored stones. Necklaces were layered like armor, shimmering under the desert sun. Rings bore cartouches inscribed with royal names, and pendants carried prayers to the gods. Jewelry wasn't just war. It proclaimed authority, immortality, and cosmic order. Perhaps no collection captures this spirit better than the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb. Found untouched after 3,000 years, his jewelry remains a breathtaking chronicle of Egypt's artistry and belief. From the pectoral featuring the scarab beetles symbolizing rebirth, to the broad collar lined with lapis and turquoise, each piece radiates not only wealth but sacred purpose. These weren't ornaments of a boy king. They were the armor of a god ascending to the stars. The craftsmanship was so advanced that modern jewelers still struggle to replicate its perfection. But jewelry in the New Kingdom also reflected Egypt's openness to the world. Trade with Nubia, Syria, and the Mediterranean introduced new materials and ideas. Silver, rarer than gold in Egypt, became a prized metal for high-status ornaments. Glassmaking flourished, allowing artisans to imitate precious stones. Egyptian jewelry began to carry foreign influences while maintaining its unmistakable identity, a symbol of Egypt's power to absorb and transform. As centuries passed into the late and Ptolemaic periods, Egyptian jewelry entered a new chapter. Greece and later Rome left their mark on the Nile's ancient traditions. Designs became more naturalistic, with vines, rosettes, and animal motifs borrowed from Hellenistic art. Yet the old symbols never vanished. The ankh, the scarab, and the Eye of Horus continued to adorn amulets and pendants, proving that Egypt's spiritual roots were too deep to be erased by conquest. The blend of Greek refinement and Egyptian mysticism created a unique hybrid style, cosmopolitan yet unmistakably Egyptian. What's remarkable is how these shifts mirrored Egypt's changing identity. As the kingdom rose, united, and then absorbed into foreign empires, its jewelry evolved from sacred simplicity to divine grandeur, then to cultural fusion. And through it all, the essence remained. Jewelry was always a bridge between heaven and earth. The goldsmith's hammer wasn't just shaping metal. It was shaping meaning, turning belief into something that could shimmer on the skin. Even today, when archaeologists open tombs or sift through ancient ruins, the glint of a tiny bead or a corroded ring can reveal entire dynasties of change. In those fragile relics, we see humanity's endless pursuit of permanence, our desire to capture beauty, faith, and love in forms that time cannot destroy. For the Egyptians, jewelry wasn't only about what they looked like. It was about who they believed they were, children of the gods, destined to shine beyond death. As the camera drifts across the golden sands of Egypt, the whispers of eternity seem to echo in the glimmer of ancient jewels. These ornaments, once clasped around the throats of queens, tied to the wrists of children, and buried with kings, speak a universal truth that beauty and belief, power and protection have always been intertwined. Egyptian jewelry was not simply an art form. It was a living faith forged into metal, a way for humans to hold the divine between their fingers. And though the temples have crumbled and the pharaohs have turned to dust, their jewelry still breathes, untouched by time, reminding us that what we create from the heart never truly dies. Every pendant, every bead, carried the heartbeat of a civilization that saw eternity in everything. To the Egyptians, gold wasn't just valuable. It was the flesh of the gods. Silver was the bones of the moon, and turquoise the laughter of the heavens. Their craftsmen were not mere artisans. They were alchemists of faith, shaping eternity into something tangible. When they hammered a sheet of gold, they believed they were echoing the creation of the world itself, bringing order to chaos with every strike. That sacred connection between creator and creation still pulses within their artifacts, shimmering beneath the museum lights of Cairo, London, and New York. But what truly makes Egyptian jewelry extraordinary isn't its craftsmanship, it's its message. It tells us that humans have always sought protection, belonging, and immortality. We wear symbols today much as they did then: crosses, stars, stones, initials, tokens of identity and belief. The Egyptians were the pioneers of this language of symbols, the first to realize that what we wear can protect our spirit as much as it adorns our body. Their jewelry wasn't fashion, it was philosophy, poetry, and prayer fused into one. Look closely at a simple Eye of Horus pendant and you'll see more than an ancient trinket. You'll see a parent's hope that their child would grow strong and unscathed. Look at a Scarab ring, and you'll find the courage of a soldier facing death, trusting that his spirit would rise again with the morning sun. Every gemstone and amulet carried a story, personal, sacred, eternal. These stories connected ordinary people to their gods and to each other, binding the living and the dead in an unbroken chain of meaning. What's perhaps most poetic is that jewelry became Egypt's greatest time traveler. While temples eroded and scrolls turned to dust, gold and stone endured. A necklace that once rested against a queen's skin still gleams today, whispering of the world she once ruled. Through it, we can feel her presence, her grace, her ambition, her humanity. It's through these ornaments that the Egyptians speak to us across 4,000 years. Their voices carried not in words, but in radiance. Modern jewelers, historians, and dreamers still look back to Egypt for inspiration. Fashion houses reinterpret the lotus flower, the winged scarab, the Ankh motif reborn for a new age. Celebrities wear replicas of Nefertiti's jewelry, unaware that they're echoing a tradition older than history itself. And in that echo lies Egypt's true magic, its ability to remain alive, reinvented in every generation that gazes upon its gold. The ancient craftsmen may not have known it, but their art became immortal, not through temples or pyramids, but through the small, sacred beauty worn against the skin. Even more profound is what these jewels remind us about ourselves. In every civilization, in every era, humans have sought to transform emotion into art, love into a ring, faith into a charm, memory into metal. The Egyptians perfected this transformation, making jewelry not just an adornment, but a vessel of the soul. Their creations remind us that we too are creators, shaping meaning in the fleeting span of our lives, hoping that something we leave behind will outlast the years. As the sands shift once more over forgotten tombs, and the desert wind hums softly through ruins, the light still catches on fragments of gold buried beneath the earth. Those glimmers are not relics of a dead world. They are messages, still alive, still shining, whispering, "We were here." We loved, we believed, and beauty kept our stories alive. So when you see a piece of ancient Egyptian jewelry, don't just see a museum treasure. See a pulse, a memory, a miracle that has survived the silence of millennia. It's more than history, it's humanity, preserved in metal and light. The magic of Egypt was never only in its temples or gods. It was in its people, in their hands, in their will, to make the eternal visible. And in every shimmer of gold, every gleam of turquoise, their spirit still endures, unchanged, unbroken, and forever divine.